Welcome to another episode of Mysteries Unknown. Back in 2007, David bought a property in northern Missouri. Fast forward to 2012, he had his very first Class A encounter with Bigfoot on his property while he was loading firewood. He had no idea that this creature was on his property, and since then, he's had everything from these creatures peeking in his windows to feeding them to surrounding him. There's all kinds of stuff to unpack in this episode. Unfortunately, due to the internet connection we had, I wasn't really able to interview him or ask him a whole lot of questions, and then we lost him towards the end, and I really couldn't finish the interview, but the story is really incredible. It goes on for a pretty long while, and it's worth listening to, so let's jump right into the story, and I'll give you my thoughts at the end of it.
So it's about 2:30 in the afternoon, April 2nd of 2012. It was kind of overcast, and the way my property is it's kind of rectangular shaped, and there's like a finger hill of land, and the top part of the hill is bare, and that's where the house and the barn are located, and then it kind of drops off on either side, on both east and west sides. And on the west side, even with my barn, I've got a small pond, and the other side's just kind of a gully, and the forest comes right up close to the house. On the west side, it starts about 20 feet from the house. So it's pretty heavily wooded, hardwood forest, oak trees and hickory are mostly. But anyway, I was going out to get this firewood that I had cut, and I had this little spot on top of the hill. It was kind of a turnaround. So I'm just getting ready to go into the turnaround, and probably 100 feet away, right at the edge of the tree line, I see a dark figure. It looked about man size, pretty good sized head. Shoulders were sort of wide, but not overly. Looked about man size from my perspective. And I'm in my truck, and I'm like, no way. And I had to I was just going into my turn. I kind of looked away for a second so I wouldn't run over a locust tree with the big thorns and get a flat tire. And when I looked back, it was gone. Now, I could have stepped 2 steps and been behind trees where I couldn't have seen it, because there were some oak trees there that over the winter the leaves hadn't dropped off, and they were smaller. Anyway, I pulled up where I was going to load up my wood, and was only about 100 feet from where I'd seen this. And I didn't see it again, and I looked over my shoulder a lot while I was grabbing the firewood, and I only took about half of what I was going to. I figured that's enough, just in case. And I went into the house, and that was that. I called the sheriff's department and asked if anybody had seen a Bigfoot, and they said no. And then they told me to call the conservation officer, and I did. And the guy said, well, we haven't had any reports of them. He goes, but they're not a protected species. He said, so my advice is if you see one, just shoot it in the face. And I said, and what is wrong with you? I said, I wasn't threatened or anything. It was just there. It wasn't hurting anything. And so then I checked around and read a whole bunch of stuff. Once I realized they were here, I didn't know how many there were. And so I kind of reached out to them, and I would put out a little snack for him once in a while. And then I had a shovel by this burn barrel where, you get an old place, you inherit a bunch of old junk, and there's a bunch of old rotten wood and plastic, and just where the previous owners had been dumping junk. So I took a burn barrel down there, and I'm burning everything that'll burn, and all the prickly briars and stuff. And I'm shoving that in, and off to my west, I'm kind of facing west, and I'm below the dam, and there's a little bit of a gully there, and that's where a lot of this stuff was. And from a little bit to the west of me, I hear some movement, and it sounds like something big. And it comes, and it gets about 75 feet away from me, I'd say, and it's behind this clump of oak trees that are probably about a foot in diameter. There's probably about 7 of them making a group, and you can't really make out much, but you could see black. And it was getting to be about May, so that's right about when everything starts leafing out. So like a week later, you can't hardly see anything in the forest because everything, all the leaves have sprung. But it was just right before that, and you could kind of see something black, dark. And I'm doing my thing, and pretty soon, I don't know if it was a pebble or an acorn or hickory nut or something, but something comes kind of flying over and hits a piece of tin in the junk by me. And I thought, okay, I know what this is, because it's not a bear, thank goodness. Bears don't throw things. And the only thing I can think of in the forest that I know is there is either a man or a Bigfoot. And it seemed like a young one being kind of playful. And I thought, okay. I kind of laughed and I said, it's okay. You don't need to be afraid. I won't hurt you. And I'm doing my thing. Pretty soon another one comes zinging over. And it was near me, not at me. I want to clarify on that, because some people think just because something flies and hits in your general direction means they're throwing at you, when they're more trying to get your attention or possibly intimidate rather than trying to hurt you. And then the creek was to the north, and then I heard some noise that way. I heard some branches breaking, and it sounded like they were, good rake handle size or so, and that was moving in from the north. And I thought, and in my mind I was thinking, this sounds like typical primate behavior. And I was thinking of, like, for example, what happens when two rival groups of chimps come together, how they do a lot of stuff with throwing rocks and breaking branches, and as a way to intimidate their rivals. And I thought, okay, there's two of them and there's just me, and I'm not armed or anything. I guess this is a good time to go up to the house and get something cold to drink. It was not one of my more gallant moments, but, hey, it is what it is. And then after that, I had been down there again, and I was noticing and hearing an awful lot of owl calls, and they were even during the day. And, it seemed like there were too many owls in the area for it to, they're pretty territorial, so you would expect, like in the spring, a pair, not three, right? Unless you're hearing some conflict. Because they'll usually drive a rival out of their territory, right? And anyway, so I realized that it was these Bigfoot, they were mimicking the owls so that they could blend in. And, over time, I'd hear all kinds of different weird stuff. You'd hear them whoop. You'd hear tree knocking. And, if you weren't really trying to concentrate on listening for it, you really didn't notice it. And then you'd hear something howling with the coyotes. It wasn't a coyote that would get them all going. And you'd hear it from more than one place. You'd hear groups that sound like about, handful of coyotes would sound off in one spot, and then you hear something that howled, I don't know, kind of like a werewolf or something, it kind of sound like, from another spot, and then another spot. And, sometimes you'd hear an awful lot of them, and it just didn't seem to make sense. And, then you'd hear the owl calls, and then they'd morph to crow. Well, crows and owls don't get along. And when it's dark, crows don't make noise, because if they do, an owl can see in the dark and he'll kill the crow. So we got calls that are morphing from owl to crow, and then they almost get sounded kind of similar to an excited chimpanzee kind of noise. So I kind of figured out that it was the females doing this. And so I read that they said don't whistle in the woods. So I kind of would do a 4-toot whistle that would mimic their owl call, and they'd call back. And then a lot of times I'd stand out on my deck at night, and it was dark because my only yard light, where the deck is, the house blocks it, so you're pretty well in the dark. And then off to the east is a gully through there. There's an old car parked down in the bottom, or I guess I should say not parked, but was like an old 50s car, and somebody rolled it down into the gully when they were done with it because it was junk. And on the next hillside there, you would hear this. And there were a couple times where I had heard it, and I'd been out with the spotlight, and I was able to spotlight them. Now, this one time, it was where the raspberries grow. I had heard the owl-like calls, and I hit the spotlight, and I saw two bright green glowing eyes and a black head, and it ducked. Now here, I've seen them up close several times. I've caught them peeking in the windows. They've come in the house. They've stolen stuff, borrowed stuff. But when you see them up close, the ones that are here, their eyes will glow brilliant green. And they've got real thick hair. It's all black. And their hair is kind of, I guess the best way to describe it is the hair on their head. They got a thick mop of hair. Kind of reminds you of like a string mop, like Raggedy Ann hair or something. But now when you see them, the only part on the face that you'll see skin is like right like this. It's right around the eyes and the nose, and because their bangs come down and cover the forehead, and the rest of the face, even on the females and the young females, it'll be covered with not a real thick beard, but there's a beard. And their skin is gray, and it's a flat color of gray, kind of about the color of tree bark. And I found footprints here from about 12 inches to 24 inches. The male tracks will go up to 24 inches, and that's a full-grown adult male, and he's 12 feet tall. And he's pretty massive. Now, the way I figured this out is one night I was sitting here where I'm at right now in front of the computer, and my kitchen is that way. And I look to my left, and in the kitchen, I've got a steel door, and it's one of those where sometimes they put the piece of plastic to make it look like it's got a whole bunch of little windows, but it's just got one big window in it, steel door. Then I've got my little deck. It's about 10 foot square. Then there's an awning. And then there's one of these braces that come down that it's a support for the awning. There's two of them. And they're kind of, like those steel rails they put on the concrete steps. It's kind of like that, but it's just, the double rail that goes up to support this fiberglass awning. Anyway, so I seen a Bigfoot standing there next to the deck looking at me through the window. And when I did, he kind of squinted his eyes, and he turned, and he was gone into the darkness because he's black. And that was inside the yard. I have my backyard fenced in for my dogs because I don't let them run. Anyway, then the following morning I went out and I looked, and I could see approximately where the top of his head was. So I brought my tape measure and I measured up, and that was where I figured the top of his head was. That was like 9 feet tall, and I could see just a faint impression of a footprint. So I went around to the edge of the deck where he was standing next to the railing, and the footprint that was there was 18 inches in length. And I've seen a lot of weird stuff. I've seen orbs with Bigfoot, encounters on 2 occasions. They looked like, I would say, they were white, probably the size of a volleyball, and up in a tree, and they didn't last very long, and they went out. But the thing that really seemed surprising is it was this brilliant white light, but it didn't radiate any light. You know how a headlight, a flashlight, anything like that, a light bulb, light radiates out from it? These, it didn't. I don't know how to explain it.
That's pretty crazy, guys. And it was really unfortunate that I was not able to interview David. But, his story was still good, and I wanted you guys to hear it. And I thought it was pretty incredible. I tried to build this platform where I don't prove or disprove anything, and I just want to give people a safe place to share these encounters, because if you're seeing this stuff and you don't really have anywhere to talk about it, it really eats at you. And I know for me personally, when I told somebody my encounter, it really helped me process it and made me feel like I wasn't so alone. So I hope that's what's happening for my guests, and I hope you guys are enjoying this type of content and appreciate the work that I'm putting into it. You know, this isn't something easy to do, but I love doing it, and I appreciate each and every one of you guys. You know, for me, everything I do is through a biblical lens, and I really do believe these creatures are Nephilim, part of the fallen angels, and I don't think they have good intentions. And David, in my opinion, is very fortunate to be here to share these encounters, because it can go bad really fast. And maybe sometimes they're like people, you run into the right one and it's going to be all right, but you run into the wrong one, you're going to have a really, really bad day. But hope you guys enjoyed that. I know it was a little bit different, but I appreciate each and every one of you guys. And like I always say, stay prayed up. We'll talk to you guys in the next episode.
I know what it's like to be facing a giant in front of you and have enemies coming at you at your back, and you feel alone and you're vulnerable and you don't know what to do. Moses in the Bible was very obedient when God told him to get to the Red Sea. And I'm sure he had doubts, and he wasn't sure what was going to happen because Pharaoh was at his back and there was a sea in front of him that was impassable. He listened to God, and God parted the Red Sea. But the part of the story I want you to take with you today is because of the impeccable timing of God. Moses didn't do anything until God told him. And because of that timing, he walked through the sea, he was delivered, and his enemies were destroyed. If he would have waited and not done it exactly when God told him to, it wouldn't have worked. So if you're standing in the storm today and there's a sea in front of you and enemies at your back, stand still till God tells you to move. He's never left you, he's never forsaken you, and he is with you in this moment. He loves you so very much, my friend. I hope you have an awesome day. Stay prayed up. Don't forget, God is your peace, strength, and refuge.